300 years ago, humanity lost its first and only war against the stars. The war lasted 17 days. On the first day, alien ships appeared above every major city on Earth. On the last day, the human fleet burned in the space above Mars. 6 billion people watched the sky turn orange with falling debris. The aliens called themselves the Hegemony of 12 Stars. They were an alliance of the 12 oldest civilizations in the galaxy. They had ruled the stars for 9 million years. They had seen young species rise and fall like waves on a beach, and they had decided that humanity was too dangerous to join them. The surrender was not a negotiation. It was a command. Humanity would be allowed to live, but only within their own solar system. They could build cargo ships. They could build science stations. They could build mining platforms. But they could never again build a warship. They could never again put weapons on a spacecraft. They could never again reach for the stars with anything but open hands to make sure humans obeyed. The Hegemony built a monitoring station at the edge of the solar system. 200 warships waited there at all times. Their sensors could detect a weapon being built on Earth from billions of kilometers away. Their guns could destroy the planet and ours, if humanity ever broke the rules. Admiral Vorath Keln had commanded that station for 40 years. He was a Rathani, a species with 4 eyes and a mouth full of sharp mandibles. His people were warriors. They had helped crush humanity in those 17 days. Now he spent his time watching a broken species crawl through their tiny corner of space. He had grown bored with the assignment. Humans were no longer a threat. They smiled at Hegemony inspectors. They traded their paintings and music for small pieces of alien technology. They asked permission before they built anything larger than a shuttle. They were exactly what the Hegemony wanted them to be: defeated, harmless, tame. So when his sensor officer called out an alert, Vorath did not even look up from his meal. "What is it?" he asked, chewing slowly. "An anomaly, Admiral. Something is emerging from behind the human moon. It's probably another mining ship. Check its registration and let it pass." "I cannot identify it, Admiral. The configuration matches nothing in our records." Vorath finally turned to look at the main display screen. What he saw made him drop his food. The ship coming out from behind Earth's moon was enormous. It was 12 kilometers long, larger than any vessel the Hegemony had ever built. Its hull was covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to move when he looked directly at them. The ship was completely black. Not painted black, but truly black, as if it swallowed all light that touched it. It had no running lights. It sent no identification signal. It did not respond to any communication attempts. "That is impossible," Vorath whispered. His mandibles clicked together nervously. "How did they build that? Our sensors should have detected construction years ago." "I do not know, Admiral. Our sensors show nothing. According to our instruments, that ship does not exist." But it did exist. It was right there on the screen, growing larger as it moved away from the moon. 200 Hegemony warships had their weapons pointed at Earth, and not one of them had seen this monster being built. Vorath stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Contact High Command immediately. Contact every Hegemony station in range. Tell them what we are seeing." "Admiral, the ship is transmitting." On screen, the transmission was simple. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language known to the galaxy. A human voice spoke words that made Vorath's blood run cold. "This is the consequence. Humanity remembers." The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped moving. They all understood what those words meant. Humanity had not forgotten the war. Humanity had not forgiven their defeat. And now humanity had built something that should have been impossible. Vorath grabbed his communication device and opened a channel to his entire fleet. "All ships to battle positions immediately. Charge all weapons. Raise all shields." This is not a drill. Round him, the 200 warships of the monitoring station began to move into formation. They had more than enough firepower to destroy a planet. Surely they had enough to destroy one ship, no matter how large. Vorath opened a channel to the human vessel. "Unknown ship, You have violated the Treaty of Tehran's submission. This is an act of war against the hegemony of 12 stars. You will shut down your engines and surrender immediately. If you do not comply, you will be destroyed." For a long moment, there was no response. Then a woman's voice came through the speakers. It was calm and steady, without any fear. "Admiral Kelm, I know who you are. I know you commanded one of the ships that burned our fleet 300 years ago. I want you to understand something before this begins. You are in no position to make demands, human. I am not making demands. I am giving you a chance. You have 15 minutes to evacuate your crews from their ships. Get them to escape pods. Get them to shuttles. Get them anywhere except inside a warship." It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You have one ship. I have 200. The hegemony has 10,000 more spread across the galaxy. You cannot win this fight. 13 minutes now, Admiral. I suggest you hurry. You are insane. Your species has gone mad from 3 centuries of isolation. Perhaps we have spent 3 centuries preparing for this exact moment. 11 minutes. Vorath cut the transmission. He turned to his tactical officer with fury in his 4 eyes. "All ships, open fire. Destroy that vessel. Show these humans why they lost the last war." 200 warships turned their weapons toward the impossible black ship. In the hearts of their crews, confidence mixed with the smallest seed of doubt. The humans had hidden this ship from the best sensors in the galaxy. What else had they hidden? On the bridge of the Consequence, Commander Elena Vasquez watched the enemy fleet prepare to fire. She was 67 years old. Her mother had served on this ship before her. Her grandmother had helped design it. 12 generations of her family had worked toward this moment. She smiled, but there was no joy in it. Only cold determination. "All stations report ready," her first officer announced. "Good," Elena said. "Let them fire first. Let them see what we have built. And then show them what humanity does when you give us 300 years and a reason to be angry." The first energy beams lanced through space toward the Consequence. The war for the galaxy had begun. Commander Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the bridge and watched 200 warships open fire on her vessel. Beams of energy bright enough to melt steel crossed the void of space. Missiles carrying nuclear warheads flew in swarms. Kinetic rounds made of heavy metal traveled at speeds that could punch through mountains. It was enough firepower to crack a moon in half. All of it headed straight for the Consequence. Elena did not flinch. She did not order evasive action. She simply watched the weapons approach and waited. The crew around her stayed calm at their stations. 3,000 men and women, all of them trained from childhood for this exact moment. They had practiced this scenario 10,000 times in simulations. They knew what would happen next. The weapons reached the ship, and then they stopped. Every beam, every missile, every bullet simply froze in space. They hung motionless about 3 meters from the hull, suspended like insects trapped in invisible amber. The light from the energy beams cast strange shadows across the black surface of the ship, but none of them touched it. On the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Vorath stared at his display in disbelief. What is happening? Why are our weapons not connecting? His tactical officer had no answer. According to their instruments, the weapons were still traveling at full speed. According to their eyes, the weapons had stopped moving completely. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Return their ordnance. The Consequence did something impossible. Every frozen weapon suddenly reversed direction. They flew back toward the ships that had fired them, but faster now. Much faster. 17 Hegemony warships exploded at the same moment. Their own weapons destroyed them. The remaining ships broke formation as their captains screamed orders to retreat. "Do not let them reach safe distance for faster-than-light travel," Elena commanded. "Keep them contained." The Consequence moved, but it did not fly through space like a normal ship. It simply appeared in different locations without crossing the distance between them. One moment it was near the moon. The next moment it was on the other side of the fleet. Then it was somewhere else entirely. Each jump cut off another escape route. The Hegemony ships found themselves herded like animals. pushed together into a tighter and tighter group. Alina watched the enemy fleet with cold eyes. Her people had worked for 300 years to build this moment. She would not waste it. The secret had begun with a scientist named Dr. Yuki Tanaka. 3 centuries ago, in the ashes of human defeat, she had made a discovery that she shared with only 7 people. The hegemony's sensors were designed to detect known types of energy: electromagnetic radiation, nuclear reactions, gravitational fields. But humanity had been experimenting with something else before the war. Something theoretical. Something the hegemony had never encountered: dark energy. The mysterious force that made up most of the universe, but could not be seen or touched by normal means. Dr. Tanaka had found a way to control it. For 300 years in secret facilities hidden across the solar system, humanity had worked on this science. Laboratories were built under the ice of Antarctica, where no satellites could see. Research stations were carved into asteroids disguised as mining operations. Testing facilities were constructed in the crushing depths of Europa's ocean. Where no sensor could reach, no digital records were kept. Nothing was ever transmitted electronically. Knowledge was passed from person to person, from parent to child, from teacher to student. Entire families dedicated their lives to mastering a science that no alien believed was possible. Children were raised knowing they would never see the results of their work. They did it anyway because their grandchildren might. The consequence was built the same way, piece by piece, over generations. Its hull was not made of metal. It was woven from stabilized dark matter, invisible to any sensor the hegemony possessed. Its engines did not burn fuel. They folded space itself, compressing reality to move the ship without actually traveling, and its weapons changed the rules of physics themselves. Alina turned to her weapons. Prepare the primary armament. Deep in the belly of the ship, a device that had taken 90 years to construct began to power up. It was not a gun in any traditional sense. It did not fire projectiles or energy beams. Instead, it created a field of altered physics. Inside that field, the laws of nature worked differently. The hegemony fleet was still trying to escape. Ships fired wildly in all directions, hoping to hit something. Some captains ordered their crews to abandon ship. Others prayed to gods that had never faced anything like this. Admiral Voreth screamed into his communicator. All ships, concentrate fire on one point. We need to break through their defenses. 150 ships fired at exactly the same spot on the Consequence's hull. The combined energy was enough to vaporize a continent. It struck the ship like a hammer blow. The Consequence did not even shudder. The dark matter hull absorbed the attack like water absorbing a stone. Primary weapon charged, the weapons officer announced. Fire. There was no flash of light. No beam crossed the void. Reality simply changed. A sphere of altered physics expanded from the front of the Consequence. It was invisible to the eye, but its effects were not. Ships designed to operate in 3 dimensions suddenly found themselves experiencing 4 dimensions. Hulls that were built to withstand pressure from outside now experienced pressure from inside as well. Crews watched in horror as the walls of their ships bent in directions that should not exist. 43 ships stopped existing in the first pulse. Some were crushed into points smaller than atoms. Others were stretched across dimensions until they simply came apart. A few simply vanished, folded into spaces between spaces where nothing could survive. Alina watched without expression. She had known this moment would come since she was 7 years old. Her mother had prepared her for it. So had her grandmother, through recorded messages left for a grandchild she would never meet. The second pulse caught. 70 more ships, the third pulse reached Admiral Voreth's flagship. He managed to send one final transmission to hegemony. High command before his ship twisted into an impossible shape and disappeared. His last words echoed across the galaxy. They are not breaking the laws of physics. They have learned new ones. Send everything. Send everyone, or we are all going to die. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the space around Earth was filled with debris from 200 warships. The monitoring station that had imprisoned humanity for 3 centuries was gone, folded into itself until nothing remained. Alina finally allowed herself to sit down. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Confirm no survivors requiring rescue. Collect any escape pods we can find. Then set course for Hegemony Central. Her navigation officer looked up with wide eyes. Commander, that is 40,000 light years away. I know. It's maximum speed. It would take us hundreds of years to get there. Lena shook her head. We are not using maximum speed. We are using folded space. How long will that take? 6 hours. The bridge went silent. Then, slowly, the crew began to smile. They had just destroyed 200 warships without taking a single casualty, and now they were going to take the fight to the heart of the enemy's empire. The Consequence turned toward the center of the galaxy and vanished. Where it had been, there was only empty space and the slowly cooling wreckage of an empire's arrogance. Humanity was no longer imprisoned. Humanity was coming for the stars. The hegemony of 12 stars had ruled the galaxy for 9 million years. In that time, they had crushed 100 rebellions. They had destroyed a dozen species they considered too dangerous to exist. They had built an empire of 10,000 worlds, commanded fleets of hundreds of thousands of warships, and never once faced an enemy they could not defeat. When Admiral Vorith's final transmission reached Hegemony High Command, they dismissed it as sensor malfunction. Surely the primitive humans had not destroyed 200 warships in 11 minutes. Surely they had not built a vessel that could ignore the laws of physics. The report was filed away for investigation. No action was taken. Then the Consequence appeared above the Rithani. Homeworld, the Rithani were one of the founding species of the hegemony. Their planet was home to 30 billion souls. Their orbital defenses were the strongest in the galaxy. A full battle group of 900 warships patrolled their system at all times. The Consequence dropped out of folded space without warning. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment a 12-kilometer black ship hung in orbit above the capital city. Alarms screamed across the planet. Defense platforms powered up their weapons. Orbital stations launched hundreds of interceptor craft. The 900 warships of the home fleet began converging from across the system on the bridge of the Consequence. Elena watched the enemy response with patient eyes. She had not slept since the battle at Earth. The ship's medical systems kept her body functioning, but exhaustion was starting to weigh on her mind. Broadcast on all frequencies, she ordered. Her communications officer nodded. Channel open, Commander. Alina spoke clearly and slowly, knowing that her words would be translated into 100 different languages. Attention Rithani leadership. We are not here for your civilians. We are not here for your cities. We are here for your warships. Withdraw your military assets beyond the orbit of your 4th planet, and no population center will be harmed. You have 2 hours to comply. The response came within minutes. The Rithani High Admiral, a scarred veteran named Korith, who had personally led the assault on Earth 3 centuries ago, appeared on screen. His 4 eyes burned with hatred. Human filth. You dare threaten our homeworld? You will die screaming for this insult. Every ship in this system will fire on you until nothing remains but ash. I am giving you a chance to save your people, Elena replied calmly. The same chance you did not give us when you attacked Earth. Take it or do not. The choice is yours. Korath cut the transmission without another word. The attack came from all directions at once. 900 warships, each one larger and more powerful than any vessel humanity had possessed before the war, opened fire simultaneously. Nuclear warheads filled the sky like angry stars. Energy beams turned the space around the Consequence into a maze of light. The ship's defense field activated automatically. Every weapon stopped 3 meters from the hull, frozen in space just as they had been at Earth. But this time, Alina did not return the fire. Fold those weapons into empty space, she ordered. I want them gone, not redirected. The missiles and beams vanished, transported to a point between galaxies where they could harm no one. Korith's voice came. Over the communication channel again, this time tinged with fear. What kind of sorcery is this? No technology can do what you are doing. It is not sorcery. It is science. Science that your people were too arrogant to imagine. You imprisoned us for 300 years, Korath. You watched us from your monitoring station and thought we were broken. You never considered that we might be working, that we might be learning, that we might be preparing. Should have killed you all when we had the chance. Yes, you should have. That was your mistake.
Oh.
The consequence began to move through the Rithani fleet. It appeared and disappeared, folding through space like a needle through cloth. Each time it appeared, it was in a different position, cutting off escape routes, herding ships away from the planet. Then the primary weapon fired. The first pulse of altered physics caught 200 ships. They did not explode. They simply stopped existing in normal space. Some were compressed into single points. Others were stretched across dimensions until they tore apart. A few were folded into impossible shapes and left drifting. Their crews still alive but unable to move or escape. The Rithani fleet broke. Ships scattered in all directions, their captains screaming orders that made no sense. Some tried to ram the consequence, hoping to damage it through sheer impact. They passed through the ship's hull like ghosts, emerging on the other side with no damage to either vessel. The second pulse caught 300 more ships. Korath's flagship was among the survivors. He watched his fleet die around him and felt something he had never experienced before. Pure, absolute terror. All remaining ships, retreat. He screamed, "Get out of the system. Get anywhere but here." But there was nowhere to run. The consequence was everywhere at once, appearing in front of any ship that tried to flee. Folding them into spaces from which they could not return, Alina watched the destruction without pleasure. This was not revenge. This was necessity. The hegemony would never negotiate with a weak enemy. They had to be shown that humanity was not weak. They had to understand that the rules had changed. The battle lasted less than an hour. 900 warships, the pride of the Rithani military, were gone. Not destroyed in the traditional sense, but removed from normal space. Sent to places so far away that they could never return. Alina made sure to leave the civilian stations untouched. The orbital platforms that held tourists and traders and families were never targeted. The consequence moved around them carefully, treating them as obstacles to avoid rather than targets to hit. When it was over, she broadcast one final message to the planet below. The Rithani military presence in this system has been neutralized. Your civilians are safe. Your cities are intact. We are not the monsters you were told we were. We are not here to destroy. We are here to free the galaxy from the hegemony's rule. She paused, then added, "Tell your leaders what you saw today. Tell them that the same thing will happen to every fleet they send against us. And tell them that humanity remembers every species that was destroyed by the hegemony. Every world that was conquered, every civilization that was crushed. We are coming to set them all free." The consequence turned away from the Rithani homeworld and vanished into folded space. Alina finally allowed herself to close her eyes. Around her, the crew worked in focused silence, preparing for the next engagement. They all knew that this was only the beginning. The hegemony had 12 founding species, 12 homeworlds, 12 fleets. They had just destroyed one, 11 remained. But as the ship traveled through compressed space toward its next target, Alina felt something she had not expected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a deep, weary determination. Her mother had told her years ago that vengeance was like fire. It could warm you, or it could consume you. The trick was knowing when to stop. Alina was not sure she would know, but she was sure of one thing. She would not stop until the hegemony fell, until humanity was free, until the galaxy learned what it meant to underestimate a species that never forgot and never forgave. The consequence emerged from folded space above another alien world. Another fleet waited. Another battle began, and humanity continued its march toward the stars. By the 20th day of the campaign, the hegemony was in chaos. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Rethani fleet destroyed in an hour. The Vortian armada removed from existence without firing a single effective shot. The Kelith defense network rendered useless by a ship that could appear anywhere. Without warning, 6 of the 12 founding species had lost their military forces. Billions of aliens watched recordings of the impossible, black ship folding through space, and felt an emotion they had never known before. Fear of humanity. On the bridge of the consequence, Alina stood at the tactical display and studied the positions of the remaining fleets. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Her body was running on stimulants and determination, but her mind was still sharp. The Hegemony High Council has called an emergency meeting, her intelligence officer reported. They are gathering at the Keth Nebula. We have intercepted communications suggesting they are planning a trap. Alina nodded slowly. How many ships? 3,000. They have pulled vessels from every remaining fleet. It is the largest military gathering in galactic history. Captain David Chen, her first officer, stepped closer and lowered his voice. Commander, 3,000 ships is a significant force. Even with our capabilities, we should approach with caution. They are desperate, Elena replied. Desperate enemies make mistakes. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. The Hegemony believes they can overwhelm us with numbers. They think that if they gather enough ships in one place, they can finally destroy us. They are wrong, but they need to see that with their own eyes. The consequence changed course toward the Keth Nebula. The nebula was a cloud of gas and radiation that stretched across several light years. Normal sensors could not penetrate it. Normal ships could not navigate through it safely. It was the perfect place for an ambush. Alina smiled grimly. The Hegemony was about to learn another lesson about humanity. As the ship approached the nebula, she gave her final orders. All stations to battle readiness. Activate gravitational detection arrays. If there are ships hiding in that cloud, I want to know exactly where they are before we enter. The consequence could not see through the nebula with normal sensors. But it did not need to. Every object with mass created tiny ripples in the fabric of space. The ship's advanced systems could detect those ripples and use them to map every vessel hidden within the gas cloud. Within minutes, the picture was clear. 3,047 Hegemony warships were waiting inside the nebula, arranged in a sphere formation. They planned to surround the consequence the moment it entered and fire from all directions at once. They really believe this will work, Chen muttered. After everything they have seen, they still think they can win through numbers alone. They have no other strategy, Alina replied. The Hegemony has ruled through superior force for 9 million years. They do not know how to do anything else. The consequence entered the nebula. The trap sprung immediately. Ships appeared from the gas clouds in every direction, weapons firing. The space around the consequence became a storm of energy beams and missiles and kinetic rounds. But the consequence was not where they expected it to be. The ship folded through space, appearing behind the fleet instead of in the middle of it. The Hegemony commanders screamed orders to reposition, but their ships were slow compared to a vessel that could ignore distance entirely. The primary weapon fired. The first pulse removed 400 ships. They vanished from normal space, transported to a point between galaxies where nothing existed except cold and darkness. Their crews were still alive when they arrived. They would live for hours or days before their air ran out, or their ships failed. But they would never return home. Alina had made a deliberate choice at the beginning of the campaign. She would not destroy enemy crews if she could avoid it. She would remove them from the battlefield, send them somewhere they could not fight. She would not slaughter them wholesale. Some of her officers had questioned this decision. The Hegemony had shown no mercy to humanity during the Contact War. Why should humanity show mercy now? Elena's answer was always the same. Because we are not them. Because we are fighting to end their empire, not to become the new version of it. Because the galaxy is watching, and they need to see that humanity fights with honor. The second pulse caught another 500 ships. The third caught 300 more. By now, the Hegemony fleet was scattering. The neat sphere formation had collapsed into chaos. Ships fled in every direction, but the consequence was always there, peering in their path. folding them into distant space. Some captains chose to surrender. They shut down their weapons and broadcast distress signals, hoping for mercy. Alina ordered her crew to accept every surrender. Those ships were marked and left alone. Other captains chose to fight to the end. They charged the consequence with weapons blazing, screaming battle cries that had inspired fear for millions of years. They died still believing they could somehow win. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, not a single hegemony warship remained in the nebula. Some had been folded away. Some had surrendered. A few had managed to escape into faster-than-light travel before the consequence could intercept them. Alina allowed herself to sit down for the first time in hours. Her body ached. Her mind was foggy with exhaustion. But she felt something that might have been satisfaction. "Casualties?" she asked. "0," Chen reported. "We did not lose a single crew member, and the enemy. We estimate that we removed approximately 2,800 ships from the battlefield. About 200 surrendered. The rest escaped or were destroyed by their own weapons, returning to them." Alina closed her eyes. 2,800 ships. Hundreds of thousands of alien crew members transported to the void between galaxies. They would die there eventually, but not by human hands. Some people would call that cruel. Alina called it necessary. The alternative was to kill them outright, and she was not willing to do that. The hegemony had murdered billions of humans during the contact war. Alina refused to respond with equal slaughter. Her communications officer spoke up. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Council. They wish to discuss terms of surrender." The bridge went silent. Officers looked at each other with disbelief. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 9 million years. They had never surrendered to anyone. Alina opened her eyes. "Put them on screen." 12 alien faces appeared before her. Representatives of the 12 founding species, the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. A few looked almost relieved. The speaker was a Keyleth, an ancient species of crystalline beings who had been among the first to achieve space travel. His voice resonated through the bridge like wind through glass tubes. "Human Commander, we acknowledge that your vessel possesses capabilities beyond our understanding. We wish to negotiate an end to hostilities." "I am listening," Alina said. "We are prepared to lift the restrictions on humanity. Your species will be granted full membership in the hegemony. You will have access to all our technology, all our resources. In exchange, you will stop your attacks and share the secrets of your ship with us." Alina was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "You misunderstand, Counselor. We are not negotiating for membership in your empire. We are negotiating for the end of your empire." The Koloth's crystalline form flickered with agitation. "You cannot expect us to simply dissolve a government that has existed for 9 million years. "I do expect exactly that. The hegemony has suppressed species, destroyed civilizations, imprisoned entire worlds because they did not fit your definition of acceptable. That ends now. All of it. This is madness. The galaxy needs order. Without the hegemony, there will be chaos." Alina leaned forward. "The galaxy needs freedom. And if you will not give it willingly, we will take it. Ship by ship, fleet by fleet, world by world, however long it takes." She cut the transmission. Around her, the crew sat in stunned silence. They had just rejected an offer of peace from the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. They had committed themselves to a war that might never end. Then, slowly, they began to smile. They were humans. They did not know how to give up. They did not know how to accept anything less than complete victory. The consequence turned toward the next target and vanished into folded space. 4 of the 12 founding species remained to be defeated. 4 more fleets stood between humanity and freedom. Alina closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow, the war would continue. But tonight, for just a few hours, she could sleep, knowing that victory was finally within reach. The last 4 fleets fell within 10 days. The Korathi tried to flee the galaxy entirely. They loaded their most important citizens onto their fastest ships and ran toward the empty void between stars. The consequence found them at the edge of known space and gave them the same choice it had given everyone else: surrender or be removed. They chose surrender. The Velith attempted a different strategy. They hid their fleet among a dense asteroid field and covered their ships, stealth materials that made them invisible to most sensors. They waited in perfect silence, hoping the consequence would pass them by. It did not. The ship's gravitational detection found them within minutes. Once again, the choice was offered. Once again, a species that had never known defeat learned what it meant to face something they could not fight. The Morith tried to negotiate. They offered treasure, territory, technology. They offered to become humanity's servants, if only they would be spared. Alina refused every offer. The hegemony would fall completely, or it would not fall at all. The final species to resist was the Thelan, the oldest of all the founding members. They had been traveling between stars when most other species were still living in caves. They had helped build the hegemony 9 million years ago. They believed that their age and wisdom made them untouchable. They gathered their remaining ships, 300 ancient vessels that had survived countless wars, and formed a final defensive line around their homeworld. Their leader, an ancient being who had lived for 10,000 years, broadcast a message to the approaching consequence: "We will not run. We will not surrender. We have stood for longer than your species has existed, and we will stand long after you are dust. Come if you dare, young ones. Show us what you have learned in your brief moment of existence." Alina respected their courage, even if she did not share their beliefs. "You are brave," she replied. "But bravery is not enough. Not today." The battle lasted 6 minutes. The Thelan ships fought with skill and determination, but they were using technology that had not changed in millions of years. The consequence operated on principles they could not even comprehend. When it was over, every Thelan warship had been folded into distant space. Their crews were alive but stranded, unable to ever return home. The ancient leader was among them. The hegemony of 12 stars had ruled the galaxy for 9 million years. It ended in 43 days. The signing ceremony took place aboard the Consequence, in a chamber that had been designed for this purpose before Elena's grandmother was born. The architects who planned the ship had always known that victory would require more than military success. It would require a new beginning for the entire galaxy. Representatives from all 12 founding species stood in a circle around a central table. They wore formal clothing and carried themselves with as much dignity as they could manage. But their eyes showed the truth. They were defeated, humiliated, forced to accept terms they never imagined they would face. Human diplomats stood opposite them. They had traveled from Earth in ships that moved through normal space, taking weeks to reach the location. It was important that ordinary humans be present for this moment, not just the crew of the impossible warship. Alina stood apart from both groups, watching from a raised platform. She was wearing a clean uniform for the first time in weeks. Her face was calm, but her heart was racing. The treaty terms were straightforward. The hegemony would dissolve completely. Each member species would keep their homeworlds and colonies, but all military vessels above a certain size would be surrendered. A new galactic council would be established, with every spacefaring species holding an equal seat. Humanity would have no more power than anyone else. Some of Elena's crew had argued against this. They wanted humanity to become the new rulers of the galaxy. They wanted revenge for 300 years of imprisonment. Alina had refused. "We did not fight this war to become the new hegemony. We fought it to end the idea that any species has the right to rule over others. If we take their place, we become exactly what we destroyed." The treaty was signed. 12 alien representatives pressed their various appendages to the document. Human diplomats added their signatures. It was done. Alina met privately with Captain Chen after the ceremony. They stood in her ready room, looking out at the stars through a viewport that showed half the galaxy spread before them. "What happens now?" Chen asked. "The ship goes into reserve. We hide it somewhere safe, maintain it, crew it with volunteers, ready in case it is ever needed again? And the technology? The dark energy science? The weapons? Alina was quiet for a moment. We share some of it. Enough to prove we are not hoarding power. Medical applications. Energy generation. Things that can help people without being turned into weapons. But the combat applications, the space folding technology at military scale, that stays with us. Some will say that makes us hypocrites. We destroyed an empire for controlling access to power, and now we are doing the same thing. Yes, they will say that. Alina turned to face him. And they might be right, but there is a difference between us and the hegemony. They used their power to suppress, to imprison, to eliminate anything they feared. We used ours to liberate, and we will continue using it that way. Not to conquer, not to rule, just to ensure that no species, including our own, ever holds the galaxy in chains again. She looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were waking up to a new reality. Species that had been crushed by the hegemony were learning that they were free. Civilizations that had lived in fear were discovering that the old rules no longer applied. It would be chaos for a while. Freedom always was at first. But Alina believed that the chaos would eventually give way to something better. Something the galaxy had never had before. True equality among the stars. The hegemony asked how we built a ship that should not exist, she said softly. They scanned it. They analyzed it. They tried everything they could think of to understand our technology. They never found the answer because they were asking the wrong question. What do you mean? They wanted to know how we built it. They should have asked why. The answer is not in the science or the engineering. The answer is in what humanity does when we have nothing left but time and anger. Alina smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes. We did not build this ship despite being imprisoned. We built it because we were imprisoned. Every generation that lived and died under their monitoring station added something. Every scientist who knew they would never see the results of their work, every parent who raised a child knowing that child would also live and die in captivity. They all contributed. Not because they expected to benefit personally, but because they believed that someday their descendants would. She placed her hand on the cool metal of the viewport frame. 12 generations, David. 12 generations of sacrifice and patience and hope. That is what the hegemony never understood. They thought they broke us when they defeated our fleet. They did not realize that they had just given us a reason to become something greater than we had ever been before. The consequence hung in space, a monument to human determination. Around it, ships from a dozen species came and went, carrying diplomats and observers and curious travelers who wanted to see the vessel that had changed everything. Alina watched them and felt a peace she had not known was possible. The war was over. Her family's work across 12 generations was complete. Humanity was free, and so was the rest of the galaxy. In her pocket was a small recording device. It contained messages from her mother and grandmother recorded decades ago, meant to be played at this moment. She had not listened to them yet. She was not sure she was ready, but she knew what they would say. The same thing every human had whispered to each other for 300 years. In laboratories hidden under ice, in workshops carved into asteroids, in homes where children learned the secret history of their species, they would say, "Remember who you are. Remember what was taken from us. Remember what we are building for those who come after." And now Alina could add her own message. Something new. Something that had never been true before. We won. She closed her eyes and let the tears come. After 300 years of waiting and working and hoping, humanity had finally returned to the stars, and they were never going to leave again.